Hi guys, Arindam here and I'm back. Yes, you heard me correctly. I'm finally back into ARK. Finally, after waiting for over 1 year, I'm finally back to doing videos the way it should be and finally starting my proper season 3. So, it has been a very long time. I had this game purchased since last November and I had to wait 1 year to finally get everything up and running. So I have a completely new system. I have a new GPU, a new CPU, new RAM, new NVMe SSD, everything is new. And now instead of having to play the game in potato settings and having it crash after every 30 seconds, I can actually play the game like this. Yes, look at this, epic. If I were to scale it down to 1080p, I can even play it at native because my current settings look like this. An RTX 4070 12GB GPU with an i7-12700 and 32GB of DDR5 RAM on Samsung SN770 Gen 4 NVMe SSD. Yes, now this game looks absolutely beautiful, and in this video I will be showing you a benchmark of how this game is performing in my system in various resolutions. So before we actually kickstart the video, I'm going to be telling you what I'll be showing you. So I'll be showing you three resolutions: 1080p, 1440p and 2160p aka 4K. I'll also be comparing the different graphics options like low, medium, high and epic, but mostly I'll be going with high and epic. For the advanced settings, everything will be turned on, and sometimes we can even have this thing as on. Now as you know, right now in version 54.23, due to various problems with frame generation, Studio Wildcard has actually disabled frame generation for all GPUs. So what I'm going to be showing you is just the DLSS and native only. So I'll be showing you three different resolutions, I'll be showing you the various graphics settings, and I'll be showing you native versus the various settings of DLSS. And before I get right to it, I'm going to be disabling the maximum frame rate because we want to see how much frames we can actually get if we were to turn the graphics settings down. So our target will be various things. We are going to find out what is the optimized setting for this combination of 4070 and 12700. Technically you already know that because you can already see, and I get mostly around 55 to 60 FPS mostly all the time. Rarely when I go up into the clouds, the FPS kind of dips into the 40s, but more or less it's very stable and superbly playable. Now okay, let's begin. In fact, let me do something. Before we actually start, we are going to start off with 1080p. And we are going to start off with native 1080p with resolution scale of 100 and everything turned to epic. Only the cinematic lighting mode will be turned off because it doesn't do much. So actually I have been playing this game for some time now. It's only now that I finally found a proper way to actually make the videos. So if you guys want to know what are the different settings I used for my soloing the ARK kind of playthrough, I'll be showcasing that in a different video. But for now, let's just see how the benchmarking results go. So I've been trying to contain my excitement. It's very hard for me to actually utter words right now because I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time to finally showcase to all of you that finally I have a new system and I can basically do what I did for ARK Survival Evolved, that is run through all of the 8 or 9 so maps, beat every single boss and finish the game 100%. and Ark Survival Ascended is clearly much superior to Evolved with all the different features it has. So before this delo bothers me, let me turn on a few systems. Let me do this. Leave me alone. So now leave me alone is turned on. Okay, look at something. My FPS is 60. My average is 56 FPS and my frame time is more or less consistent. Currently, I am using my current playable character, which is very close to the maximum. It's level 97. I am using default version of the Riot chest piece, and as you can see, I have all of the dice already enabled. And I recently killed an alpha mosasaur and I got some of these fireworks skin. I'll be showcasing all of that in a later video. And for my insulation, I have my standardized otter with melee damage, etc. Okay, so as you can see, when we are playing the game in 1080p native with everything turned to epic, we are getting very good frame rates, consistent 60 FPS. Let's go higher up. Currently, by the way, it's around 9 o'clock in the morning. Let's use fly command to go into the clouds and see how the volumetric clouds is going to affect our FPS. Not much. Let's go down the river. Let's see how the FPS changes. Note the 1% and average FPS. Unfortunately, there is very bad volumetric fog in... There is a very bad case of volumetric fog that kind of makes the entirety of the ocean unusable because it severely limits the visibility. I am guessing a charged tech helmet will be able to solve this perfectly. So, as you can see, it's consistently 60 FPS. If I were to travel very fast around the various biomes, it is going to consistently load some of the newer things. And while loading it, you will see that sometimes the FPS dips. Look at this part. Look at the god rays. The god rays are actually shimmering. This is because one of the optimizations that Studio Wildcard has done is instead of the god rays being rendering in native resolution, the god rays currently render at a reduced resolution. So to ensure that the god rays actually render in native and not like this current option, let's do one thing. Let's see render target mode. Okay, so we have volumetric render target mode. You can see 0 means trace at quarter resolution, which is the default, and 3, if I recall correctly, 3 means it is going to use the full resolution. Now look at this. Now it looks much better, isn't it? It still isn't perfect. The shimmering is still sort of there, but at least it's better than what was before. And as you can see, the frame rate has also dropped. This is one of the reasons why this was actually reduced. If I make it 0, it becomes very bad. 1 kind of makes it very similar to what we have used to, and 2 practically removes the entirety of the rays. So as you can see, with 2 it looks very weird. So I'm going to make it 3, as I am mostly used to, or 1. The next most important thing about graphics settings is the density of the grass as well as the rocks. So there is a particular option that can dramatically increase or decrease your FPS, and by decreasing your FPS, it can dramatically increase how good the foliage and the different rocks look. If you are trying to make a video where you are trying to beautify the entirety of the settings, then you might be able to use this particular setting momentarily to increase the graphical fidelity. So to do that, let's do this. Let's do grass density. So we have grass density. 3 is the default value. Mostly it's the default value. But if you want more rocks and if you want more grass, let's see this. We have the grass and we have the rocks. Let's do something. Let's change it to 10. Note the graphical fidelity and note the FPS. Look at how much dense the grass is, and look at how many more rocks were generated. So this is mostly the power of nanite. If I am correct, this is basically Unreal Engine 5's nanite technology used to dynamically create all the grass and the foliage, and it can make the entire thing look much better. In fact, if I can push it to even 20, it will look even more dense. So if you are trying to create those cinematic screenshots where you are going into the woods like this with the grass, then the higher value of grass density is going to be really helpful. But mostly it's not required. We would just go with the normal case of 3 and see the frame rate has steadily increased. Okay. The 1% was 0 all this time. That is because I have not pressed the recording button for the benchmarking, so entire thing got missed. Now I have pressed it, so you are getting proper 1% figures. So long story short, you can see that on epic settings with everything turned on, we are getting really good FPS. Let's go into a different biome before I change from 1080p to a different setting. Let's go into the ice biome. As you can see, it is still hovering into the 60 FPS. Clearly an RTX 4070 is a 1440p graphics card. It's not meant for 1080p, and i7 12700, it might be 2 or even 3 generations old now that Intel is going to release its 15th gen, or should I say Core Ultra 200 later this year. So even though the 12700 is pretty old, it is still more than enough to deal with ARK. One additional thing that I'll mention to all of you is that note the RAM usage. So if you were to go into Steam, look at the system requirements, you will find that ARK Survival Evolves recommended setting lists 32 GB of system memory. Most I would say around 95 or even 99% of the video games will be okay with a system memory of 16 GB RAM. You don't need more than 16 GB if you are playing a video game at 1080p or even 1440p. But ARK Survival Ascended is different. It requires 32 GB RAM at recommended, and it just so happens that ARK Ascended happens to be the very first video game that I have played which causes me to use more than 16 GB of memory. As you can see, the RAM usage is hovering at 22 GB. It's the first and only game that has ever done this. So I have played a lot of games. I have played GTA 5 with tons of mods. I have played Red Dead Redemption 2, and in fact if you have been following my channel for just after I released my previous 3 videos for ARK Ascended, you may have noticed my Cyberpunk 2077 videos, which I had played at 1440p with all settings maxed out, including maximum ray tracing and path tracing and ray reconstruction. So even with all of those settings, I was still not requiring more than 16 GB of RAM. At that time, in fact, I did not even have more than 16 GB of RAM, and it was running perfectly. But ARK Ascended seems to be the first game that requires more than 16 GB. And this 22 GB RAM is more or less consistent. So I have been observing this game for the past 1 week now, and I have seen that my RAM usage has always been above 22 GB. So it has not even dropped to 21 or 20 GB. So this was native resolution. As you can see, 60 GB is more or less consistent. um, let's do something. Let's disable the volumetric cloud and volumetric fog and see how it behaves. So let me do volumetric cloud and 0, and in one shot the FPS increased a lot. Next thing, let's change the volumetric fog. It's lot smoother now, and because you remove the fog, you can see everything underwater. So we were already hitting above 60 FPS, so removing the fog and the cloud didn't matter too much. Now let's do one thing. Let's change it from native to DLSS. Okay, by the way, this always defaults to 90. I don't know why. This is something weird that happens all the time. So I believe all this time it was only 90%. Now it is mostly 100%. But as you can see, it doesn't really matter. It's always going to 60 FPS. Next thing, let's see how much we can push the performance, how much we can push the FPS at 1080p. So we are going to go into DLSS. We are going to go into ultra performance. So before I proceed any further, one thing I have to mention is DLSS stands for deep learning super sampling, and DLSS you might think that DLSS is going to increase the FPS, but what DLSS actually do is DLSS takes help of your CPU a lot, which means if you are enabling DLSS, your CPU has to be sufficiently powerful to handle that additional load. So if your entire system is bottlenecked by your CPU and you try to use DLSS, it's not going to be of much use. In my case, I have a 12700, which is more than enough to deal with any kind of CPU load that DLSS gives. So we're going to get this. So now we are in ultra performance mode with okay, I have a feeling that there might be some weird VSync going on in our system. Otherwise, I have VSync disabled here and I have VSync disabled from the Nvidia control panel, and still it is giving me this weird VSync thing. I don't know, maybe it's forced or something. But anyway, we can see that frame time is very less, so it's buttery smooth and the FPS is consistently sitting at 60 FPS. No problem. Let's now do something. Let's turn this on into my recommended setting. So generally when I play the game, I play at 1080p. I make it around quality. I turn this thing on, and all these things are at epic. I usually don't use the cinematic lighting mode all the time, but it's good to have generally when you're taking screenshots in photo mode. So this is usually how I play the game or do any kind of recording or anything. I usually record my videos in 2K and I play the game in 1080p or 2K depending upon the current load of the system. As you can see, with a 4070 and 12700 I can easily play the game. One thing I forgot to mention is, so I had a previous system which had i5 7600 processor, and the GPU doesn't matter. What I want to highlight is that, and it's not, and only one video on YouTube, one very small YouTuber has actually mentioned this. So this is very important. ARK Survival Ascended is not a CPU bound game. It's a GPU bound game, but for your CPU, for your processor, your CPU needs to have a minimum of 6 physical threads or logical threads. This is the most important part. Your CPU must have 6 threads. It doesn't have to have 6 cores, but it needs to have 6 threads. So my i5 7600, which had 4 cores and 4 threads, was hanging up after every 30 seconds. If I were to be using i7 7700, just one more grade above my 7600, if I were to be using that old i7 7700K, it is going to have 4 cores but 8 threads, and ARK is going to require a minimum of 6 threads to run smoothly, which means the fact that the i7 7700 has 8 threads means you will be able to play this game without any problems at 7700. If you have a good GPU, suppose you have a RTX 3060 Ti or a RTX 4060, and you pair it up with a very old i7 7700 or a i5 8600 or a 8700, you will be able to play the game without any problems. You may have to lower a couple of settings, but you are not going to be facing the problem that me and a lot of other players have been facing. That is, the ARK, even though you have put everything in low minimum settings, even though your GPU utilization is barely like 15-20%, your CPU will always be at 100% if you have less than 6 threads, and eventually it is going to crash the game. That is what was happening for me for the past 1 year. So how did I figure it out? I figured it out using 2 means. One, that particular YouTube video done by that YouTuber actually highlighted the exact same issue, and I would thank that person a lot for that. And secondly, I bought the RTX 4070 last year itself, and unfortunately, because my CPU was a meager 7600, even with a 4070 I was not being able to play the game. So when I purchased the 12700 very recently, hardly like 2 weeks ago, then with that same 4070 I was able to push everything to epic without any problems. Okay, so that was a lot of the pep talk. Now let me go into 2K. Let's push it to 2K. Let's make it native. Resolution scale 100. VSync off. Graphics everything to epic. Save. Okay. Now let's see. Everything looks really nice. Okay, let me do one thing. Volumetric cloud 1 and volumetric fog 1. So we are at Carno Island. As you can see, a 4070 is a 2K card, a 1440p card, and a 12700 can easily handle 2K or even 4K resolutions, and that is perfectly proof in my current FPS. So I'm getting 50 FPS, 50 to 55 FPS all the time in 2K. The FPS is going to tank a bit if I were to go into the foliage a lot. Sometimes. Okay, it's not happening right now. The FPS is very good right now, but I have observed that when I go into the jungles, sometimes the FPS slightly takes a dip. My frame time is only 0.7 millisecond or 2 millisecond, which means it's very good. Everything is super stable. Let's try to see how it looks like underneath the waves. Everything is perfectly fine. Frame times are perfect. Let's go into the jungles, deep jungles or marsh maybe. Now you can see the FPS is still good, but not close to 60 FPS. It's hovering in the 40s now. So when you go into the jungles, you get all of this lush vegetation. There is a lot of lumen based global illumination happening, illuminating all the different objects. You have a lot of shadows being cast, and this is why the FPS is slightly lower. Instead of 50s, now you are in the lower 40s or even sometimes dropping to around 38, 39. But still This is very good frame rate. You are playing the game, remember, you are playing ARK Ascended at 2K with native, it's not even DLSS, native. Okay, I did not do this, and I don't know why this has happened. This is yet another one of the long list of bugs that Studio Wildcard somehow finds a way to introduce. Anyway, so I'm hoping this is 100% scale now, and okay, so you can see it's in the 30s. This is still playable, by the way. Some of you might think that 60 FPS is the way to go, but considering it's a survival game, not a very fast-paced game like Counter-Strike or Fortnite, this FPS is more than enough. Very playable frame rate. If you go into water, you can see all the dynamic water effects. Again, a very cool technology that Wildcard has introduced into the game. Okay. Now, let's do something. Let's make it night. So set time of day. Let's make it night. Deep at night. So make it 23. So now it's night. Night is not that dark anymore compared to ARK Survival Evolved. The moonlight is very strong, and you can see even at night the frame rate is very good. It's excellent actually. And I'm still not even used DLSS. Now let's see if we can make this 60 FPS. Let's change this to DLSS and quality. Instead of higher 30s and lower 40s, now it has gone into the higher 40s and lower 50s. It's still very good, the frame rates. Let's try to come close to that lighting source. Maybe the lighting is going to decrease our FPS. Apparently no. So the frame time, everything is perfect. If I were to go very fast, this is by the way stress testing, this is something that you won't be doing anyway. So if I were to go very fast like I'm doing right now, you can see the frame rate is in the 30s. This is because even with my system, ARK is a very taxing game, and it is constantly loading things into buffer. If I were to go into the clouds, okay, it becomes exactly dark, not good. Acha. So we have seen how 2K works. Now let's see if I can change it to from quality, let's make it performance. How much will this change? Now it is 60 FPS with performance. So 2K, if you want 60 FPS with everything turned to epic, performance is going to work. And by the way, with an RTX 4070, I have a 12700. You might be asking why I chose a 12700 and not a 13th gen or a 14th gen processor, or even wait for the 15th gen. The reason is, first of all, I am going to choose an Intel processor. I have an AMD CPU also, and because of certain things that I've observed in AMD based systems, I'm not going to go into that. I have decided to go with the Intel plus Nvidia's build system. And for Intel, 13th and 14th gen CPUs have issues like the CPU's kind of melting, overheating, consuming a lot of power. I don't want that. And I don't want to be in a situation in which I am constantly thinking whether increasing a graphics setting is going to actually melt my CPU. So instead I have tried to go with one of the most powerful CPUs that is both cheap, powerful and scalable. That is the 12700. It is cheap as in, at my current system, at my current place of stay, it is around half. The 12700 is half the price of a 14600. That's that's a very weird thing to even think of. A 14600 is an i5. It's powerful, but it's still an i5, and a 12700 having higher performance cores is half the price of the 14600. Second thing is, most video games seem to think about how much cores, how much threads the CPU has, and it makes more sense for me to actually consider a CPU that has more number of performance cores versus a CPU that has more number of cores in total, that is more number of efficiency cores. So the later models like the 14600K, they have a lot of efficiency cores. I don't need that. I don't need too much of parallelism. What I need is a few cores that should be able to give me very high frame rates in my video games, and also not bottleneck my GPU. And also finally, the future video games should not say that I don't have enough number of threads to actually run the game, which is why the 12700 was the best choice for me. And 12700 is also kind of beefy, so I had to use a completely separate cooler master, CPU cooler for this. Anyway, enough of rambling. As you can see that 60 FPS is perfectly fine. Now we are going to go with the big one, 4K. And yes, native 4K native, and let's make it, and it will be 100. Hopefully wildcard is not going to make any problems here. Okay, a 4070 can handle 4K in Cyberpunk 2077. I have tried it, I have played it, I have made videos around it, and it worked. But this game is a bit too much. I'm playing ARK Survival Ascended with a 4070 4K native, and look what happened. Let's see. Let me do something. Let me again go back and see. Okay, now it's 100. Very weird thing. So everything is at epic except cinematic lighting. Now let's look at the frame rate. Well, it's not unplayable. Note the amount of power being consumed by the RTX 4070. It's at nearly 100% and it's consuming 180 watts. So 185, 191 watts. Its TDP is rated as 200 watts, by the way. But it's the CPU, sorry, the CPU, it's still at 12%, because the higher resolution you go, the more higher settings you actually use, the game becomes more GPU bound and less CPU bound. So it's a weird way of saying that if you were to increase the resolution of your game, you will bottleneck your CPU less compared to a lower resolution. And currently at 4K native, it is still sort of giving okay frame rates, like 25 FPS, 20 FPS is still okay. It's a survival game, not a multiplayer shooter, so this FPS is still okay. Now let's go into settings, change this to DLSS quality. Let's see what just the first level of DLSS does. Well, frame rate has increased very slightly, at least it is touching the 30s now, and this is not too bad. I mean, it's definitely playable. If you are in a very stressful situation with lots of enemy dinos nearby, then this might be a bit of a trouble, but this is perfectly fine. 4K quality DLSS, this is perfectly fine. And wait, let me do one thing. If you want to play at 4K and you want to increase your FPS a bit more, we can always do this. You can change this to 0, 1 down, and we can change this to 0, another 1 down. Okay, and let's do one more thing. Time of day, it should be set time of day. Okay, make it 9 o'clock. Now it's morning. If I were to remove the volumetric cloud and fog, now I'm getting around I'm even getting 40 FPS, which is really good for 4K. Next thing what you can do is you can change the grass density scale to 0. If you make it 0, all of these nanite based rocks and grass is going to disappear. Check this out. Gone. And suddenly instead of 30s I am now getting 40s. My FPS is in the 40s now. These three things, the grass density scale, volumetric cloud, these two, and followed by volumetric fog, these three are going to change your FPS a lot. Yes. And in fact, let me tell you this more. The grass density scale affects the FPS very highly. It affects even more than volumetric cloud. So if you were to disable all these nanite based rocks, then you're going to be getting a lot of FPS. Now that we are at 4K, let's change this to balanced off, and we would still want at least volumetric cloud. I mean, lot of people are going to play with volumetric fog turned off, because fog actually makes some of the areas very difficult to navigate, especially the tops of mountains and underwater. So but you would actually want volumetric cloud on, because that makes the game look really nice. So as you can see, on balanced it is getting around 30 odd FPS. It's not bad actually, it's still very much playable. In fact, when I was playing ARK Survival Evolved back in 2016-17, I used to play everything on epic settings, some on high, some mostly on epic. I am used to getting FPS in the 30s, 40s, and sometimes 50s. So this is very much playable for me. If I now changed it to performance, let's see what happens. Hey, not bad. It's much more smoother now. I mean, now we're getting in the 40s. So 4K performance mode, this is perfectly playable. If you consider a 12700 as equivalent to a 13600 or a 14600, then with a 14600 and RTX 4070, you would be able to comfortably play at 4K settings. And this is good, by the way. This looks really good, by the way. Now let's try ultra performance. Now it is very smooth. I can show you the FPS on the screen, but you cannot actually know how smooth my mouse movements are becoming. So right now on ultra performance, I am not getting any kind of lag in my mouse movements. It's silky smooth. So it feels like 60 FPS actually. So with my current setup, it is actually possible for me to play the game in using 4K at 60 FPS without frame generation. So all I have to do is make it ultra performance or make it around balanced performance and remove some of these settings. From all of the graphics settings option, I would highly recommend that if you have at least a RTX 3060, then you compulsorily should have global illumination quality at high or epic. Do not lessen it to low or medium. This is Graphically, global illumination quality is the most important setting, and if you reduce it to medium, lot of the coloration, lot of the color grading, lot of things get removed. So this is the biggest, I think this is the single biggest change in graphical fidelity across all the things. This is the first one. Second will be the general shadows. Low looks incredibly bad. I mean, it is better to turn off shadows completely instead of mark it as low. I would still say if you have a 3060, make it medium or high. And epic is perfectly fine if you have 4070 or a 3070, all these things. I have not seen much use between textures, so textures you can keep it as epic all the time. Advanced graphics should always be set at epic, and post processing can be set at high. View distance, depending upon how good your CPU is, whether you are using a very good NVMe SSD and how much RAM you have, you can actually lessen it to medium or high. The only difference you're going to find is there will be lot of pop-ins. For me, epic is more or less fine for me. Regarding this, lot of people actually turn off the light bloom because it kind of I mean, the bloom kind of hurts your eyes, but I really like the bloom effect that is there on the different light sources, so I turn all these things on. This setting is very important. So disable HLOD. HLOD stands for hierarchical level of detail. So when you are disabling it, that is when you are marking it as on, you will actually gain a bit of FPS. So if you keep it as off, if you keep this thing as off, you are actually enabling HLOD. This setting is a bit weird. So disable is a negative word, so when you are marking it as on, then it's actually HLOD is off, and when this is on, HLOD is off, you are getting more FPS. When this thing is turned off, which means HLOD is present, your FPS is going to drop by a couple of frames, but even though there will be a bit increase in graphical fidelity, that is imperceptible. So most of the time I will just keep it on. It doesn't really matter much. These ones actually make it look really good. So when I'm flying my Argentavis above the sea water and the wings kind of go inside the water momentarily, I can see that the water fluids kind of change. These settings look really good, but they are actually kind of taxing, especially on the CPU and the RAM. So let me, now that we are at 4K, okay, I am not going to go very fast on this because I have found out at least in 2 occasions where I have moved around the map very fast at 4K and it had crashed my ARK completely. I don't want that. So let's go into the mountains where, okay, that's a Giga. Okay, I think I need to tame this guy. So anyway, before I proceed any further, let me do the final thing, that is I'm going to revert back to the setting that I use for playing my video games, and I don't use 2K. I use 2K mostly for what you can say, I use 2K mostly for recording videos, but I play video games at around 1080p, which suits me perfectly fine. So everything is at epic, these things are all on, this is on, this I keep it as off. So using this setting, and I don't know why this gets turned off all the time. So using this setting, this is the setting that I'm getting. This is how I play the game. As you can see, it's very comfortable. When ARK Ascended got released, these things, you can see that all that mountain is completely naked. There is no vegetation around. So if I come close, then the vegetation is going to spawn in. These are some of the optimizations that Studio Wildcard has actually done to ensure that the game actually runs in a better way. So when Ascended got released, all of these things used to load also with the near ones, which tanked the FPS significantly. all in all, long story short, I can now play the game comfortably at all the settings turned to epic, and which means after this video I will be able to finally showcase to you all of the things that I have done on ARK Survival Evolved and even more. And aside from the usual cave runs, boss battles, base tours that I have shown in my ARK Survival Evolved videos, there are a lot of plans I have for ARK Ascended. Lot of plans. So I'm hoping that in the next few years I should have around 500 or even 1000 ARK Ascended videos by the time Ascended becomes stale, and I'll be covering videos on everything. I'm not sure if I'll be doing a let's play or not, because quite frankly I find it very tough to simultaneously play a game and talk, but I'll be showing you all of the important parts, especially the parts that will be centered around PvE and single player solo experience. I'm not a PvP player, I don't get the time for it, so I'll mostly have to skip the PvP part of it, that is playing online. So yeah, that is it. I'm very happy and very excited that now I'll be able to showcase to you all these videos. It costed me a lot of money and it costed me a lot of time and a lot of patience to finally reach this point, that I can finally play the game after waiting for over 1 year. And I hope that the wait was worth it, and I hope that now everything is going to go back to normal. So yeah, that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, stay tuned for more videos, and thank you for watching.